Magnolia Thornfield was juggling 3 coffee cups when the phone rang. Not just any phone. Her ancient cell that insisted on playing La Cucaracha at maximum volume, even when she swore she'd put it on silent. "Hello?" she managed to answer, balancing the device against her chin while trying not to spill hot coffee on the reports scattered across the tiny table in her studio apartment. Magnolia Thornfield? The voice on the other end sounded like expensive champagne being poured into crystal flutes, elegant, effervescent, and completely out of reach for someone like her. Speaking. She frowned. Nobody called her by her full name except when she was in trouble. Who is this? Cordelia Whitmore Sterling, Executive Assistant to the Belmont Foundation. I have the pleasure of informing you that you've been selected to participate in our annual charity gala this Saturday. Magnolia nearly choked on her coffee. I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong number. I'm a kindergarten teacher, not. I don't attend galas. There's no mistake, Miss Thornfield. Your work with underprivileged children has caught our attention. The foundation would like to honor you. The world stopped. Magnolia slowly sat down on the only chair not occupied by stacks of papers to grade. Honor? Me? Precisely. The event will be at the Belmont Mansion. Black tie dress code. A car will pick you up at 7 p.m. Details will follow by email. Oh, and Miss Thornfield. Cordelia's voice took on a honeyed tone. The foundation will cover all your expenses for the evening. Dress, shoes, accessories. Consider it our gift. We want you to feel completely comfortable. The call ended before Magnolia could form a coherent response. She stared at the phone as if it were an alien artifact. Black tie? She murmured to the empty apartment. They're paying for everything. Meanwhile, across town in a glass tower that scraped the clouds, Cordelia Whitmore Sterling hung up the phone and turned to face the man sitting behind the mahogany desk. It's done, she announced with satisfaction. Magnolia Thornfield will be there Saturday night. Sebastian Grimm leaned back in his leather chair, a predatory smile playing on his lips. At 55, he was still handsome in a silver fox way that made people forget how dangerous he could be. His fingers drummed against the desk as he contemplated his plan. Perfect. And you're certain she has no idea about the Ashworth scandal? Absolutely certain. The girl lives in a bubble. Work, home, work. No social media presence worth mentioning. No connections to our world. She's perfect. Too perfect, Sebastian mused. Which is exactly why this will work. When the photos surfaced Monday morning, showing her at the gala, laughing and enjoying herself just days after the Ashworth Foundation money went missing, well, the optics will be devastating. Cordelia shifted uncomfortably. Are you sure about this, Sebastian? She seems genuinely innocent. Sebastian's eyes hardened. Innocent or not, someone needs to take the fall for that missing money. The real embezzler covered their tracks too well, and I need a scapegoat before the board investigation reaches my door. Miss Thornfield's connection to children's charities makes her the perfect patsy, close enough to be believable, naive enough to be manipulated. And if she figures out what's happening? She won't. By the time anyone realizes the truth, she'll be branded as the woman who stole from sick children. Her reputation will be ruined, and I'll be safely out of suspicion. He stood up, straightening his tie. Make sure everything is ready for Saturday. This has to look absolutely authentic. 3 days later, Magnolia stood in front of the mirror in the most expensive boutique she'd ever entered, wearing a dress that normally cost more than her monthly salary. The sales assistant, a woman named Vivian with eyebrows that defied gravity, circled around her like a fashionable vulture. Perfect, declared Vivian, adjusting an invisible pleat. You look absolutely stunning. Magnolia didn't feel stunning. She felt like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. The navy blue dress hugged curves she didn't know she had, and the shoes were so high she'd need supplemental oxygen. Are you sure I don't look like I'm wearing a costume? She asked, turning awkwardly. Darling. Vivian sighed dramatically. Confidence is the best accessory. Wear it. The strangest part was how easy everything had been. Cordelia had arranged for her to visit 3 boutiques, all expenses paid, with personal stylists waiting. It felt too good to be true, but Magnolia pushed down her suspicions. Maybe this was how charity foundations operated. On Saturday night, Magnolia stood at her apartment window watching the street like a soldier awaiting battle orders. The new dress hung on her closet door. She had watched 16 YouTube videos about how to walk in high heels without dying and practiced high society conversations in the mirror. "Lovely weather, don't you think?" she told her reflection. "Oh yes, I adore opera, especially that one, with the people singing." The intercom buzzed at exactly 7 p.m. "Miss Thornfield, your transportation has arrived." She swallowed hard. Now or never. 20 minutes later, she was being driven by a uniformed chauffeur toward a part of town she only knew from television. The houses grew larger, the gardens more elaborate, until they stopped in front of something that looked more like a fairy tale palace. The Belmont mansion rose majestically against the night sky, with illuminated windows twinkling like jewels. Luxury cars formed an elegant line at the circular entrance, where men in tuxedos and women in gowns gracefully alighted. "We've arrived, miss," announced the driver, opening her door. Magnolia took a deep breath. "Right, I can do this. I'm a brave teacher who faces 25-year-olds every day. A party can't be worse than that." The first steps went surprisingly well. She managed to exit the car without tripping, climb the marble stairway without breaking an ankle, and hand her invitation to security without stuttering. It was when she crossed the golden entrance doors that everything started going wrong. The main hall was a spectacle of marble, crystal, and more money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes. Elegant men and women conversed in small groups, holding champagne flutes and laughing at jokes that probably involved numbers with many zeros. "Magnolia," a female voice called behind her. She turned to find a stunning woman approaching. Perfectly arranged blonde hair, a dress that cost more than a car, and a smile that could illuminate a stadium. "Cordelia?" Magnolia ventured. "The very one. What a joy to finally meet you in person." Cordelia hugged her as if they were old friends. "Come, I must introduce you to some people." Before she could protest, Magnolia was dragged through the hall. Cordelia introduced her to everyone with excessive enthusiasm. "This is Magnolia Thornfield, our honoree of the evening." People smiled, nodded, and made polite comments before drifting away. Magnolia began to notice something strange about the way they looked at her, not with admiration but with something that seemed like malicious curiosity. "Cordelia," she said during a pause between introductions, "about this honor. Exactly what do you know about my work?" Cordelia's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Oh, darling, let's save that for the official speech. Look, I must introduce you to our most generous benefactor." She pointed to a man across the hall. Tall, chestnut hair slightly tousled in a way that seemed intentional, wearing a tuxedo as if he'd been born for it. He was leaning against the wall, observing the party with an expression that oscillated between boredom and amusement. "Who is he?" asked Magnolia, feeling a strange chill in her stomach. "Dashiell Blackwood," whispered Cordelia with reverence. "Heir to the Blackwood Empire, philanthropist and—" She paused dramatically. "Completely single." At that moment, as if sensing he was being watched, Dashiell looked directly at them. His eyes, gray like a winter storm, met Magnolia's across the crowded hall. And something in the air changed. He pushed away from the wall and began walking toward them with fluid, determined movements. Magnolia felt her heart accelerate in a way that had nothing to do with social nervousness. "Oh my God," murmured Cordelia. "He's coming this way. Don't mess this up." But when Dashiell stopped in front of them, it wasn't Cordelia he looked at. It was Magnolia, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't decipher. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "So," he said, and his voice was like whiskey with honey, "you're the famous Magnolia Thornfield." The way he said famous made her stomach sink. There was an irony there, an implication she didn't understand. "Famous is an exaggeration," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just teach children." "Teach children," he repeated, and for a moment he seemed genuinely confused. "And nothing else?" What else would there be? Dashiell and Cordelia exchanged a quick look that Magnolia caught but didn't understand. Nothing, he said finally. Absolutely nothing. But there was something in his tone that suggested exactly the opposite. A waiter passed offering champagne. Magnolia accepted a flute, grateful to have something to do with her hands. So, Mr. Blackwood, she said, trying to sound casual. What brought you to this event? Besides philanthropy, of course. He smiled, and it was like the sun emerging after a storm. Curiosity, he replied. And you can call me Dashiell. Dashiell, she repeated, liking how the name felt on her tongue. And you can surprise me by telling me exactly what you're doing here, he said, leaning slightly toward her. The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? Cordelia said I was selected for an honor. Dashiell studied her face for a long moment as if trying to solve a puzzle. And you really don't know why? For my work with underprivileged children, apparently. The uncertainty in her own voice bothered her. Underprivileged children, he murmured. Of course. Cordelia appeared beside them like a blonde hurricane. Dashiell, how wonderful to see you here. I'm sure you and Magnolia have much in common. I'm sure we do, he replied, but his eyes never left Magnolia's face. In fact, I'm beginning to think we have more in common than I imagined. The sound of a spoon against crystal echoed through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, announced an amplified voice, if you could make your way to the banquet hall, the ceremony is about to begin. Magnolia felt her stomach contract. Ceremony. Honor. Suddenly, everything seemed very real and very frightening. Excuse me, she said quickly. I need powder room. Before they could respond, she hurried away toward what she hoped was the ladies' room, her high heels clicking nervously on the marble floor. She found the bathroom, a luxurious space with golden mirrors and fresh flowers, and leaned against the sink looking at her own reflection. What are you doing here, Magnolia? She whispered to the image in the mirror. And why do I get the feeling there's something everyone knows but me? The door opened and Cordelia entered, her perfect smile slightly tremulous. Darling, is everything all right? The ceremony is starting and… Cordelia. Magnolia turned to face her. I need to know the truth. Why exactly am I here? For a moment, Cordelia's face revealed something that looked like panic. Then the smile returned, brighter than before. To be honored, of course. Now come, we can't keep everyone waiting. But as they left the bathroom, Magnolia couldn't ignore the growing sensation that she was walking straight into a trap. And worse still, a part of her was beginning to wonder if Dashiell Blackwood knew exactly what kind of trap it was. The banquet hall was even more magnificent than the main foyer, if such a thing were possible. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across tables draped in white silk, each centerpiece a masterpiece of orchids and roses that probably cost more than Magnolia's monthly rent. She found herself seated at the head table, directly in Dashiell's line of sight, which made her alternately thrilled and terrified. Ladies and gentlemen, boomed a voice from the podium. Sebastian Grimm stood there like a silver-haired king addressing his court, his smile so practiced it could have been trademarked. Tonight we gather to celebrate the unsung heroes of our community. Magnolia's palms grew sweaty. She reached for her water glass and nearly knocked over the champagne flute beside it. Dashiell, seated 3 chairs away, caught her eye and winked. The simple gesture sent butterflies rioting in her stomach. Our honoree tonight, Sebastian continued, his voice dripping with false warmth, represents the very best of charitable work. Miss Magnolia Thornfield has dedicated her life to helping children in need. Polite applause rippled through the room. Magnolia felt her cheeks burn as hundreds of eyes turned toward her. She managed a wobbly smile and a small wave that felt more like a nervous twitch. Miss Thornfield, Sebastian gestured grandly, would you please join me on stage? The world tilted. This wasn't supposed to happen. Cordelia had mentioned a ceremony, not a speech. Magnolia's throat went dry as desert sand. Go on, whispered the elderly woman beside her, giving her an encouraging pat. Don't be shy, dear. Magnolia stood on unsteady legs, her new heels suddenly feeling like stilts. The walk to the stage seemed to stretch into infinity, each step echoing in the cavernous room. Sebastian extended his hand to help her up the steps, his grip surprisingly firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Magnolia Thornfield," Sebastian announced, stepping aside to give her the microphone. She stared at the sea of expectant faces, her mind completely blank. The microphone felt like a snake in her trembling hands. She began, then stopped. A bead of sweat rolled down her back. "I'm not really sure why I'm here." Nervous laughter bubbled through the audience. Sebastian's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "What I mean is," Magnolia continued, finding her footing, "I'm just a kindergarten teacher. I read stories about brave princesses and help tie shoelaces and clean up glitter explosions. I don't save the world or cure diseases or—" She gestured helplessly at the opulent room. "Attend fancy parties." The laughter was warmer now, more genuine. She caught sight of Dashiell, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Admiration? Concern? "But maybe that's the point," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Maybe heroism isn't about grand gestures or big donations. Maybe it's about showing up every day for the people who need you, even when, especially when, nobody's watching." The applause that followed was thunderous. Magnolia felt a rush of pride and terror in equal measure. She'd actually done it, given a speech without fainting or running away. Sebastian reclaimed the microphone with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Beautifully spoken, Miss Thornfield. As a token of our appreciation, the Belmont Foundation would like to present you with this check for $50,000 to continue your important work." The room erupted in applause again. Magnolia stared at the oversized check Sebastian was holding, the numbers swimming before her eyes. $50,000? It was more money than she'd ever seen in one place. I can't accept this," she stammered. Sebastian's eyebrows shot up. "Nonsense, you've earned it." "But I haven't done anything to earn it. I mean, I teach 20 kids in a public school classroom. That's my job, not charity work." The room had gone uncomfortably quiet. Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Miss Thornfield, surely you don't want to disappoint all these generous donors who specifically wanted to support your endeavors." There was something in his tone that made her skin crawl. A threat disguised as encouragement. She looked out at the audience, seeing confusion on some faces, calculation on others. "Of course not," she said quietly, accepting the check with numb fingers. "Thank you." More applause, but it felt hollow now. As she walked back to her seat, Magnolia caught snippets of whispered conversations. "Strange reaction. Knows something we don't. Very convincing performance." Performance? What performance? She barely tasted the 7-course meal that followed. Sebastian made more speeches about the importance of charity and community service, each word feeling like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Cordelia kept shooting her encouraging smiles from across the room, but there was something frantic in her eyes. "You gave a beautiful speech," Dashiell said during the dessert course, leaning toward her. He smelled like cedar and something expensive she couldn't identify. "Thank you. Though I'm still not entirely sure what I'm being honored for." "That makes 2 of us," he said quietly, and something in his voice made her look at him more sharply. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, Sebastian appeared beside their table. "Mr. Blackwood, how wonderful to see you here tonight. I trust you're enjoying yourself?" "Immensely," Dashiell replied, his tone perfectly polite and completely cold. "Though I have to say I'm curious about the selection process for tonight's honoree." Sebastian's smile could have cut glass. "Oh, Miss Thornfield came highly recommended. Her work with the Ashworth Foundation's children's program was particularly impressive." Magnolia's fork clattered against her plate. "The Ashworth Foundation? I've never worked with any Ashworth Foundation." The silence that followed was deafening. Sebastian's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, calculation, barely concealed panic. "Perhaps you know it by another name," he said smoothly. "These organizations sometimes rebrand." "No," Magnolia said, her voice growing stronger. I would remember. I've only ever worked for the public school system and volunteered at the local community center. I've never heard of the Ashworth Foundation in my life. Dashiell was watching Sebastian with the intensity of a hawk eyeing prey. That's interesting, he said conversationally, because the Ashworth Foundation is currently under investigation for missing funds. Someone embezzled nearly $2 million meant for sick children. The blood drained from Sebastian's face. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Dashiell continued, rising from his chair, is why you thought you could frame an innocent woman for your crimes. The word frame hit Magnolia like a physical blow. The elegant ballroom suddenly felt like a cage, all eyes on her, whispers spreading like wildfire. She stood up so quickly her chair tipped backward. What's going on? She demanded, looking between Sebastian and Dashiell. What's he talking about? Sebastian's mask finally slipped completely. You were supposed to play along, he hissed. Take the money, smile for the cameras, give us someone to blame when the story breaks. Blame for what? But even as she asked, the pieces were clicking into place. The mysterious invitation, the paid-for dress, the oversized check. The photographers she'd noticed lurking at the edges of the room all evening. You sick bastard, Dashiell said, his voice deadly quiet. You actually thought you could destroy an innocent woman to save yourself. She's nobody, Sebastian spat. A kindergarten teacher. Who would believe her over me? That was the final straw. Magnolia grabbed her water glass and threw its contents directly into Sebastian's face. The room gasped collectively as water dripped from his nose and chin. I may be nobody, she said, her voice shaking with rage, but at least I'm not a coward who steals from children. Without waiting for a response, she marched toward the exit, her head held high despite the chaos erupting behind her. She could hear Dashiell's voice calling her name, but she didn't stop. She needed air, space, anywhere but this nightmare of marble and lies. She burst through the mansion's front doors and into the cool night air, gasping as if she'd been underwater. The valet looked startled as she stumbled down the steps, her elegant facade finally cracking. Ma'am, is everything all right? He asked. Should I call your car? I don't have a car, she laughed bitterly. I don't have anything. I'm exactly what he said, nobody. That's not true. She spun around to find Dashiell standing in the doorway, his bow tie undone and hanging loose around his neck, his usually perfect hair disheveled. How can you say that? She asked, tears threatening. You saw what just happened. I was set up, used, made to look like a fool. No, he said, walking down the steps toward her. You were magnificent. You stood up to a powerful man who tried to destroy you, and you did it with grace and dignity. I threw water in his face, and it was the most satisfying thing I've seen all year. He was close enough now that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. Magnolia Thornfield, you are definitely not nobody. For a moment, standing there in the soft glow of the mansion's lights with this impossibly handsome man looking at her like she was something precious, she almost believed him. Get in the car, Dashiell said, gesturing toward a sleek black Aston Martin parked at the curb. Magnolia stared at him through her tears. I'm not getting in a stranger's car. For all I know, you're part of this whole scheme. Fair point. He pulled out his phone and held it toward her. Call anyone you want. Tell them you're with Dashiell Blackwood license plate. He rattled off the numbers. Better yet, call the police, report everything that just happened. The sincerity in his voice made her pause. Why are you helping me? Because Sebastian Grimm has been stealing from charities for years and I've been trying to catch him. Dashiell loosened his bow tie completely and pulled it off. You just handed me the evidence I needed. Evidence? I didn't do anything except make a fool of myself. You proved your innocence in front of 200 witnesses. When Sebastian said you worked for Ashworth Foundation and you denied it, his whole plan fell apart. Dashiell opened the passenger door. Please, Magnolia, let me explain everything, but not here. Half the people in that party are probably calling reporters right now. As if summoned by his words, camera flashes began popping in the mansion's windows. Magnolia's stomach lurched as she realized people were taking pictures of her standing on the steps in her borrowed gown. "Oh God," she whispered. "This is going to be everywhere, isn't it?" "Not if I can help it." Dashiell's voice was grim. "But we need to move. Now." Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Magnolia got into the car. The leather seats smelled expensive and foreign, like a life she'd never live. Dashiell slid behind the wheel and pulled away from the mansion with practiced ease. "Where are we going?" she asked, gripping the door handle. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can talk without Sebastian's spies listening." He glanced at her profile in the dashboard lights. "I have a cabin about an hour outside the city, completely private." "Absolutely not." Magnolia turned to face him fully. "I am not going to some isolated cabin with a man I met 3 hours ago. Stop the car." "Magnolia, stop the car." He pulled into a 24-hour diner parking lot, the neon sign casting pink and blue shadows across his face. For a moment they sat in silence, the engine ticking as it cooled. "You're right," he said finally. "This is insane. You don't know me, you have no reason to trust me, and I'm asking you to disappear into the night with me." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "If I were you, I'd run." "Then why should I stay?" Dashiell turned to look at her, and in the neon glow she could see something raw and honest in his expression. "Because 3 months ago, Sebastian tried to frame my sister for embezzling from a children's hospital. She's autistic, barely speaks to strangers, and he knew she'd never be able to defend herself properly. By the time I figured out what was happening, her reputation was destroyed. She had a nervous breakdown and hasn't left her room since." Magnolia felt her anger deflate like a punctured balloon. "Oh my God. I've been tracking his pattern ever since. He finds vulnerable people connected to children's charities, sets them up as scapegoats, then disappears the real evidence while everyone's focused on the fall guy." Dashiell's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You were supposed to be his latest victim. But why me? I'm nobody special." "That's exactly why. You work with children, you have no powerful connections, no resources to fight back. In Sebastian's mind, you were perfect, sympathetic enough that people would be outraged when you were exposed, but powerless enough that you'd never be able to prove your innocence." Magnolia stared out the window at the diner, where a tired waitress was refilling coffee for a truck driver. Normal people living normal lives, blissfully unaware that people like Sebastian Grimm existed. "How do you know all this?" she asked quietly. "Because I hired a private investigator to dig into Sebastian's background after what happened to Elena, my sister. We found a pattern going back 5 years, at least 8 people, all framed for embezzlement, all connected to children's charities." His voice grew harder. "All of them had their lives destroyed while Sebastian walked away clean. And tonight? Tonight you did something none of the others could do. You proved your innocence publicly, in front of witnesses he can't intimidate or buy off. You gave me what I need to bring him down." Magnolia closed her eyes, feeling suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her feeling hollow and wrung out. "I just want to go home." "I know, and you can. But Magnolia," he reached over and gently touched her hand. "Sebastian isn't going to give up just because his first plan failed. He'll try to salvage this somehow, probably by claiming you were in on it from the beginning. That check he gave you? He'll say it was payment for your cooperation. But I gave it back. Did you? Or did you just walk away with it? Because I'm betting that's how his version of events will go." Horror washed over her as she realized he was right. In all the chaos, she'd forgotten about the check entirely. It was probably still sitting on the table where she'd left it, but who would believe that? "He's going to destroy me, isn't he?" she whispered. "Not if I destroy him first." The quiet certainty in Dashiell's voice made her look at him. In the diner's neon glow, he looked like an avenging angel, beautiful and dangerous and utterly determined. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this for me? For your sister, I understand. But me? You don't even know me." Dashiell was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because when you stood up there tonight and talked about showing up for people even when nobody's watching, I realized I'd been watching you for months. What? Your school is 3 blocks from my office building. I walk past it sometimes during lunch and I'd see you in the playground with your kids. You were always there, in the rain, in the snow, making sure they were safe and happy. And I'd think... He stopped, shaking his head. What? She pressed. I'd think that you were the kind of person I'd want my children to have as a teacher someday. The kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it. He looked at her then, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. When I realized Sebastian was targeting you, it felt personal. The silence stretched between them, charged with possibilities neither of them seemed ready to name. There's something else, Dashiell said finally. Sebastian isn't just some random criminal. He's connected to some very powerful people who've been covering for him. Taking him down isn't going to be easy, and it's definitely not going to be safe. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you want to walk away right now, I'll drive you home and you'll never see me again. You can try to go back to your normal life and hope Sebastian leaves you alone. He paused. Or you can help me stop him from doing this to anyone else. Magnolia looked at the diner again, at the ordinary people living their ordinary lives. She thought about Elena, broken and hidden away. She thought about the 8 other victims Dashiell had mentioned, their lives ruined by one man's greed. If I help you, she said slowly, what happens to me? To my job, my life? I won't lie to you. It's going to get messy before it gets better. There will probably be reporters, investigations, court proceedings, but at the end of it, you'll have your reputation back and Sebastian will be where he belongs. And if we fail, then we both go down together. He smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. But I have a feeling that anyone brave enough to throw water in Sebastian Grimm's face isn't going down without a fight. Despite everything, the fear, the confusion, the complete upheaval of her quiet life, Magnolia found herself smiling back. When you put it like that, she said, how can I refuse? So you'll help me? She thought of her 20 kindergartners, who trusted her to protect them from scraped knees and hurt feelings. She thought of Elena, hiding in her room. She thought of 8 other innocent people whose lives had been destroyed. Yes, she said firmly. I'll help you take down Sebastian Grimm. Dashiell's smile was brilliant enough to power the diner's neon sign. In that case, we have work to do, and I know exactly where to start. Your apartment or mine? Dashiell asked as they pulled back onto the road. Excuse me? Magnolia nearly choked on her own spit. For the evidence, he said quickly, his cheeks flushing slightly in the dashboard light. We need somewhere private to go through everything my investigator found. Somewhere Sebastian won't think to look. Oh, right. Evidence. She felt her own face burning. My place is basically a closet with a Murphy bed, and you probably shouldn't be seen there anyway. Sebastian's people might be watching. Fair point. My penthouse it is. Of course you have a penthouse, she muttered. Is that a problem? She gestured at her borrowed gown and impossibly high heels. Look at me, Dashiell. I'm wearing someone else's life right now. In 12 hours, I'll be back in my thrift store cardigans grading spelling tests. Your penthouse and I don't exactly move in the same circles. He was quiet for several blocks before speaking. My penthouse has terrible Wi-Fi. The dishwasher's broken, and there's currently a family of raccoons living on my balcony because I can't figure out how to make them leave without hurting their feelings. Raccoons? The mother has these tiny babies, and they look at me with these enormous eyes. He shrugged helplessly. I named them. That was my first mistake. Despite everything, Magnolia found herself giggling. You named raccoons? The mom is Duchess. Very regal bearing. The babies are Duke, Earl, and Countess. He grinned sheepishly. I may have gotten carried away with the nobility theme. Oh my God, you're ridiculous. But she was smiling now, the tension in her shoulders finally starting to ease. The point is, he continued, fancy a dress doesn't mean fancy life. I'm just a guy who happens to live 40 floors up and has a weird relationship with urban wildlife. 20 minutes later, Magnolia stood in the marble foyer of Dashiell's building, trying not to gawk at the doorman's elaborate uniform or the fresh orchid arrangements that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. "Evening, Mr. Blackwood," the doorman said politely, though his eyes lingered curiously on Magnolia's formal attire. "Evening, James. Could you please ensure we're not disturbed tonight? I'm expecting it might be a long evening of work." "Of course, sir. Should I hold your calls?" "All of them. And James, if anyone asks if Miss Thornfield is here, she's not." They rode the elevator in comfortable silence, Magnolia trying to process how dramatically her life had changed in the span of 4 hours. This morning, her biggest worry had been whether Tommy Chen would finally master tying his shoes. Now she was riding to a penthouse with a ridiculously handsome billionaire to plot the takedown of a criminal mastermind. "Welcome to Castle Blackwood," Dashiell said as the elevator doors opened directly into his apartment. Magnolia stepped out and immediately understood why he'd downplayed it. Yes, the space was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city, but it was also clearly lived in. Books were stacked on every surface. A half-finished crossword puzzle lay on the coffee table, and there was a coffee mug with a cartoon cat that said, "World's okayest human," sitting on the kitchen counter. "It's perfect," she said, and meant it. "The raccoon family is out there." He pointed to the balcony, where she could indeed see several small forms huddled together. "Don't make direct eye contact with Duchess. She takes it as a challenge." Magnolia burst into laughter, real, genuine laughter that felt like the first honest emotion she'd had all evening. "I can't believe this is my life right now. Believe me, it's not what I had planned for Saturday night either." Dashiell disappeared into what she assumed was his bedroom and returned moments later wearing jeans and a Harvard Law sweatshirt, looking infinitely more approachable. Better? Much. Though honestly, he looked good in everything. It was irritating. "Coffee? This is going to be a long night." While he made coffee in a machine that looked like it belonged on a spaceship, Magnolia kicked off her torture devices, aka heels, and curled up on his couch. The adrenaline crash was hitting hard, leaving her feeling wrung out and slightly dizzy. "Here," Dashiell said, setting down a steaming mug and draping a soft throw blanket around her shoulders. "You're shivering." "I didn't realize." But she was. Whether from cold or shock, she couldn't tell. He settled beside her with his own coffee and a thick manila folder. "Ready for this?" "As I'll ever be." For the next 2 hours, they went through everything: bank records, charity documents, testimonies from Sebastian's previous victims, and most damning of all, email communications between Sebastian and his co-conspirators that the investigator had somehow obtained. "Look at this," Dashiell said, pointing to an email dated 3 weeks ago. "Sebastian to someone called V. Found the perfect patsy. Kindergarten teacher, clean record, no connections. Will be child's play to frame. And here, V responds, make sure she's at the gala. I'll handle the media narrative afterward." Magnolia's blood ran cold. They planned the whole thing, the invitation, the dress, the photographers, all of it. But here's what they didn't count on. He flipped to another page. "My investigator has been tracking Sebastian's real financial transactions. The money didn't disappear. It was moved to an offshore account 3 days before you ever got that phone call. Can you prove it? With this? Absolutely. The question is how to get it to the authorities without Sebastian's people burying it." Magnolia studied the papers spread across the coffee table, her teacher brain automatically organizing information into patterns. What about the other victims? The 8 people he framed before? What about them? If they all testified together, told their stories at the same time? She looked up at him. It wouldn't just be your word against Sebastian's anymore. It would be a pattern witnessed by dozens of people. Dashiell stared at her for a moment, then broke into a grin that transformed his entire face. "You brilliant, beautiful woman." The words hung in the air between them. Magnolia felt heat rush to her cheeks as Dashiell seemed to realize what he'd said. "I mean," he started. "I know what you meant," she said softly. But did she? Because the way he was looking at her now, with something warm and wondering in his gray eyes, suggested he might have meant exactly what he'd said. "Magnolia," he said quietly, setting down his coffee cup. "Yes? I need you to know that whatever happens with Sebastian, whatever comes next, meeting you tonight, it's the best thing that's happened to me in years." Her heart did something acrobatic in her chest. Even though I threw water in someone's face and basically destroyed a charity gala? Especially because of that. He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You're extraordinary." She could hardly breathe. He was so close she could see the gold flecks in his eyes, could smell that cedar and expensive soap scent that was purely him. If she leaned forward just a little, a crash from the balcony made them both jump apart. Through the window they could see Duchess the raccoon standing over what appeared to be the remains of a flower pot, looking remarkably unapologetic. "I should probably..." Dashiell gestured helplessly toward the balcony. "Right. Yes. Raccoon emergency." They stared at each other for another heartbeat, the moment crackling with possibility. Then Dashiell cleared his throat and stood up. "We should call it a night," he said. "Big day tomorrow if we're going to contact Sebastian's other victims." "Right. Big day." Magnolia gathered up her shoes and the remains of her dignity. "I should go. I'll call you a car." "No, I can take the subway." "Magnolia," his voice was firm, "you're not taking the subway at 2 a.m. in an evening gown. I'm calling you a car." She wanted to argue, but honestly, she was too tired and emotionally wrung out to fight. "Fine, but I'm paying for it. We'll discuss it later." As they waited for the elevator, Magnolia couldn't help stealing glances at him. In a few hours, this man had become... what? Her partner? Her ally? Something more? "Dashiell?" "Yeah? Thank you. For tonight. For believing me. For..." She gestured helplessly. "Everything." He smiled, and it was soft and real, and made her stomach flutter. "Thank you for being brave enough to trust me." The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside. As they began to close, she heard him call her name. "Magnolia?" She stuck her hand out to stop the doors. "Yes? This isn't over. I mean, Sebastian, the investigation, all of it. We're going to see this through together." "I know. And after we do..." The doors started to close again. "After we do what?" she called. But they'd already shut, leaving her with his unfinished sentence and a heart full of possibilities. Magnolia woke up to her phone ringing at 6:47 a.m., which was either very early or very late depending on how you looked at it. She'd finally fallen asleep around 4, still wearing the borrowed gown because she'd been too exhausted to figure out how to get out of it without breaking something expensive. "Hello?" she croaked, not bothering to check the caller ID. "Have you seen the news?" Dashiell's voice was tight with controlled fury. "What news? It's not even 7 in the morning." "Check your phone. Channel 8, Channel 12, and every gossip blog in the city. Sebastian moved fast." With a growing sense of dread, Magnolia pulled up her browser. The first headline made her stomach drop. "Charity scammer exposed at Belmont Gala." Below it was a photo of her accepting the oversized check, smiling broadly. "Oh no," she whispered. "Keep reading," Dashiell said grimly. The article painted her as a criminal mastermind who'd been caught red-handed. According to anonymous sources close to the investigation, Magnolia Thornfield had been embezzling from the Ashworth Foundation for months, using her position as a children's advocate to gain access to donor funds. The $50,000 check was described as payment for services rendered in the elaborate scheme. "They're calling me the kindergarten con artist," she said faintly. "There's more." Sebastian gave an exclusive interview to Channel 12. "He's playing the role of the heartbroken philanthropist who trusted the wrong person." Magnolia switched to the video. Sebastian sat behind his mahogany desk, looking appropriately grave and disappointed. "I feel personally betrayed," he was saying. "Miss Thornfield came highly recommended. To discover that she was using sick children as cover for her criminal activities. It's devastating." That lying, manipulative. Magnolia's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Then another. Then 5 more in rapid succession. Don't answer, Dashiell said. It's probably reporters. This is a nightmare. Dashiell, what am I going to do? I have to work tomorrow. I have 20 kids counting on me and now everyone thinks I'm a criminal. You're not going anywhere near that school tomorrow. What do you mean? I mean, Sebastian's people will be watching, reporters will be camping outside, and the school board will probably want to suspend you pending investigation. If you show up, you'll be walking into a media circus. The reality of her situation was starting to sink in. Her quiet, predictable life was gone. Her reputation was in tatters. Her students would think their teacher was a thief. I need coffee, she said weakly. And a lawyer, and possibly a new identity. I'm on my way over. Dashiell, you can't. If someone sees you here, it'll make everything worse. Let me worry about that. What's your address? Despite her protests, she found herself giving him directions to her tiny studio apartment. 20 minutes later, there was a soft knock at her door. She peered through the peephole to see Dashiell standing in the hallway wearing a baseball cap, sunglasses, and a Columbia University hoodie. Nice disguise, she said, opening the door. Very Clark Kent. It worked, didn't it? No one followed me. He stepped inside and immediately looked around with unconcealed curiosity. Wow, it really is tiny. Thanks for the observation. She gestured helplessly at her 400-square-foot kingdom. Coffee's on the counter. Sorry, there's nowhere to sit except the bed. If the situation weren't so dire, she might have been embarrassed by the intimacy of having him in her personal space. But right now, she was too grateful for the company to care about propriety. We need to move fast, Dashiell said, settling cross-legged on her Murphy bed like it was perfectly normal to hold strategy meetings in someone's bedroom. Sebastian got his story out first, which means we're playing defense. But I have some good news. Please tell me you found a way to fix this. Better. My investigator contacted 3 of Sebastian's previous victims overnight. They're willing to meet with us today. Magnolia felt a spark of hope. Really? Doctor. Jennifer Walsh was framed for stealing from a children's hospital 2 years ago. Marcus Rodriguez was accused of embezzling from a youth sports program, and Catherine Ming supposedly stole from a scholarship fund for underprivileged kids. Dashiell's expression was grim. All of them lost their jobs, their reputations, their careers. They've been waiting for a chance at justice. Where are we meeting them? My lawyer's office. Neutral ground, completely secure. He paused. There's something else. The investigator found financial records showing that Sebastian's been funneling money to someone high up in the city attorney's office. Someone who's been making sure the investigations into his scapegoats are thorough while the investigations into him disappear. Someone's been covering for him. More than covering. Actively helping him destroy innocent people. Dashiell's jaw tightened. But that ends now. Magnolia's phone buzzed again. This time she recognized the number. Her principal, Mrs. Henderson. I have to take this, she said apologetically. Magnolia? Mrs. Henderson's voice was strained. I need you to know that the school board called an emergency meeting this morning, given the allegations. Mrs. Henderson, none of it's true. I've never even heard of the Ashworth Foundation before last night. I believe you, dear. I've worked with you for 3 years, and I know your character. But the board is concerned about the media attention. They're placing you on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Magnolia closed her eyes. She'd known this was coming, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. What about my kids? They start their spring projects tomorrow. I'll handle your class personally. But Magnolia, I need to warn you. There are reporters outside the school asking questions. Some parents are already calling, worried about their children's safety. Their safety? From me? I know it's ridiculous, but you need to stay away from the school until this is resolved, for everyone's sake. After she hung up, Magnolia sat in stunned silence. Dashiell moved closer, his presence a warm, steady comfort in her suddenly chaotic world. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Those kids, they'll think I abandoned them. Tommy Chen was finally starting to read chapter books, and Sarah Martinez was getting brave enough to raise her hand in class discussions. Her voice broke. They're going to think I'm a bad person. No, they're not. Kids are smarter than adults give them credit for. They know who you are. Do they? Because right now I'm not sure I do. Dashiell reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. You're someone who throws water in the face of powerful men when they try to hurt innocent people. You're someone who cares more about 25-year-olds than her own safety. You're someone worth fighting for. The sincerity in his voice made her eyes fill with tears. How do you always know exactly what to say? Practice, he said with a wry smile. I've spent a lot of time talking Elena through panic attacks since Sebastian destroyed her life. How is she? Your sister? Better since last night. When I told her we might actually be able to prove Sebastian's guilt, she spoke more than she has in months. His expression softened. She wants to meet you. Really? Really. She said anyone brave enough to humiliate Sebastian Grimm at his own party must be totally awesome. Those were her exact words. Despite everything, Magnolia found herself smiling. I'd like to meet her too. You will. But first, we have work to do. Dashiell stood and extended his hand to help her up. Ready to meet the others and plan Sebastian's downfall? Magnolia looked at his outstretched hand, strong, steady, offering partnership in a fight that could cost them everything. She thought about her ruined reputation, her suspended job, her 20 heartbroken students. She thought about Elena, hiding in her room. She thought about all the other innocent people Sebastian had destroyed. Let's go ruin that bastard, she said, taking his hand. Dashiell's answering smile was fierce and brilliant. Now you're talking. As they prepared to leave her apartment, possibly for the last time as plain old Magnolia Thornfield kindergarten teacher, she caught sight of herself in the mirror, still wearing the borrowed gown, hair wild from a restless night, eyes bright with determination and something that might have been excitement. She looked like someone ready for war. You know, she said as they headed for the door, I've never been in a fight this big before. Neither have I, Dashiell admitted. But I have a feeling we make a pretty good team. Looking at their reflection in her hallway mirror, him in his disguise, her in her battle gown, Magnolia thought he might be right. The law office of Patterson and Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown building, all marble and mahogany and the kind of quiet that whispered expensive. Magnolia felt underdressed in her hastily thrown-together outfit of jeans and a sweater, but Dashiell's hand at the small of her back gave her courage. Ms. Thornfield, Mr. Blackwood, the receptionist said with professional warmth. Mr. Patterson is waiting for you in conference room A. They were led down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-looking men in expensive suits, all of whom seemed to disapprove of Magnolia's existence. At the end of the hall, double doors opened to reveal a room that could have hosted a small wedding. 3 people sat around the massive conference table, and Magnolia's heart clenched as she recognized the same shell-shocked expression she'd seen in her own mirror that morning. These were Sebastian's other victims, and they all had the particular haunted look of people whose lives had been destroyed by forces beyond their control. Everyone, said the silver-haired man at the head of the table, I'm Richard Patterson, and these are the people who've been waiting to meet you. Dr. Jennifer Walsh looked like she'd once been the type of pediatrician who wore cartoon scrubs and kept lollipops in her pockets. Now she seemed diminished, her shoulders curved inward as if protecting herself from further blows. Marcus Rodriguez had the build of someone who'd spent his life coaching kids' sports, but his eyes were tired and defeated. Catherine Ming wore a perfectly pressed blazer and had the precise posture of someone who'd learned not to take up too much space. I can't believe he did it again, Dr. Walsh said, her voice barely above a whisper. When I saw the news this morning, we all felt the same way, Marcus said, his accent carrying traces of his Texas childhood. Like watching a car crash in slow motion except the car was your life. Catherine leaned forward, studying Magnolia with sharp intelligence. But you're fighting back. That's different. The rest of us, we just took it. I had help, Magnolia said, glancing at Dashiell. And honestly, I didn't have much choice. He backed me into a corner. Sebastian's mistake, Patterson said, spreading files across the table, was assuming Ms. Thornfield would react like his previous victims. But kindergarten teachers, as it turns out, are used to dealing with bullies. Tell us what happened to each of you, Dashiell said gently. We need to understand his pattern. Dr. Walsh went first, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. 2 years ago, she'd been accused of stealing medication from the children's hospital where she worked. The evidence had been circumstantial but damning. Missing inventory records, forged signatures, and a sudden influx of cash into her personal account that she couldn't explain. I lost my medical license, she said. My husband left me. My own children wouldn't speak to me for months. I went from being someone who saved kids' lives to being branded a monster who stole from sick children. Marcus's story was similar. As director of a youth sports program, he'd been framed for embezzling equipment funds. The evidence included fake invoices and doctored bank statements showing payments to his personal account. 20 years of coaching kids, he said, shaking his head. 20 years of teaching them about teamwork and integrity, and suddenly I'm the guy who stole their uniforms and equipment money. Catherine had been the director of a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. Sebastian's people had made it look like she'd been awarding fake scholarships to non-existent students and pocketing the money. The worst part, she said quietly, was the kids who didn't get scholarships because the fund was frozen during the investigation. Real kids with real dreams whose futures got put on hold because Sebastian needed a scapegoat. The room fell silent. Magnolia felt sick thinking about how many lives Sebastian had destroyed, how many dreams he'd crushed for his own financial gain. How did he choose you? She asked. We all worked with children's charities, Dr. Walsh said. All of us had clean records, good reputations. We were trusted. And trusting, Marcus added bitterly. When his people first approached us about routine audits and standard financial reviews, we cooperated fully. We had nothing to hide. That was the trap, Catherine said. Our honesty became evidence of our guilt. Our cooperation looked like panic. Our clean records made the fake evidence more believable. Patterson cleared his throat. Which brings us to why we're here. Individually, each case was dismissed as isolated incidents. But together we show a pattern, Magnolia finished. Systematic targeting of people connected to children's charities. Exactly. And with the evidence Mr. Blackwood's investigator has gathered, we can prove it. Patterson opened his briefcase and pulled out thick folders. Bank records showing the real path of the stolen money. Email communications between Sebastian and his co-conspirators. Most importantly, proof that someone in the city attorney's office has been deliberately sabotaging investigations into Sebastian while fast-tracking cases against his scapegoats. Dashiell leaned forward. Who? Assistant District Attorney Victoria Sterling. She's been Sebastian's inside person for at least 3 years. Sterling? Magnolia frowned. Any relation to Cordelia Whitmore Sterling? Her sister-in-law, Patterson said grimly. This conspiracy goes deeper than we initially thought. The pieces were clicking into place. Cordelia's nervous behavior at the gala, the way she'd pushed so hard to get Magnolia to the event, the overly detailed story about the Ashworth Foundation. She knew, Magnolia said. Cordelia knew it was all a setup. More than knew. She was actively involved in recruiting you. Dashiell's voice was tight with anger. The private investigator found email chains between her and Sebastian going back months. They were specifically looking for someone in your profession, with your background in your geographic area. But why go to all this trouble? Dr. Walsh asked. Why not just hide the money better? Because Sebastian's not just stealing, Patterson explained. He's been running a systematic scam. He identifies wealthy donors who want to give to children's charities. He creates fake foundations, convinces them to donate, then disappears the money. But eventually, donors start asking questions. So he needs scapegoats, people to blame when the money goes missing. People like us, Marcus said quietly. People exactly like you. Trusted figures in children's advocacy who can't afford the legal representation needed to fight back effectively. Patterson's expression was grim. He's not just a thief. He's a predator who specifically targets good people doing important work. Magnolia felt anger building in her chest, hot and clean and energizing. How do we stop him? We go public, Catherine said. All of us at the same time. Make it impossible to dismiss as isolated incidents. And we do it before he can frame anyone else, Dr. Walsh added, some of her old fire returning to her eyes. I have contacts at 3 major news outlets, Patterson said. If we can coordinate simultaneous interviews with all the evidence laid out clearly. Sebastian's house of cards collapses, Dashiell finished. But what about Victoria Sterling? Magnolia asked. If she's been protecting Sebastian, won't she just make this all disappear again? Not if the story's big enough, not if there's enough public pressure. Patterson smiled grimly. Politicians hate bad publicity more than they hate losing money. They spent the next 2 hours planning their media offensive. Each victim would tell their story to a different outlet, while Patterson and Dashiell worked their connections to ensure the evidence got to the right prosecutors. It was ambitious, risky, and their only real shot at justice. There's one more thing, Dashiell said as they were wrapping up. Sebastian's going to retaliate. Hard. When this story breaks, he'll try to destroy all of us even more thoroughly than he already has. Let him try, Catherine said with quiet ferocity. I've been dead professionally for 2 years. What else can he take? My reputation's already shot, Dr. Walsh agreed. At this point, I've got nothing left to lose. And everything to gain, Marcus added. Maybe I'll never coach again, but at least I can make sure other people don't go through what we did. Magnolia looked around the table at these brave, broken people who were willing to risk everything for justice. When do we do this? Tomorrow morning, Patterson said. Before Sebastian has time to prepare counter-narratives or buy more protection. As the meeting broke up, Dr. Walsh approached Magnolia. I want you to know, she said quietly, watching you at that gala last night, seeing you stand up to Sebastian in front of all those people, it gave me hope for the first time in 2 years. You're giving me hope right now, Magnolia replied. All of you are. Outside the law office, Dashiell and Magnolia walked in comfortable silence toward his car. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the buildings, and for a moment, the city felt peaceful instead of threatening. Ready for this? Dashiell asked as they reached his car. Magnolia thought about her students, about Elena hiding in her room, about Dr. Walsh's medical license, and Marcus's coaching career and Catherine's scholarship fund. She thought about all the future victims Sebastian would claim if they didn't stop him. More ready than I've ever been for anything, she said. Dashiell smiled, and it was proud and fierce and made her heart skip beats. Sebastian Grimm has no idea what he's unleashed. No, Magnolia agreed, feeling something powerful and determined settling in her chest. He really doesn't. At 6 a.m. sharp, Magnolia's phone started ringing. Not the gentle chime of her alarm, but the aggressive buzz of an incoming call. Then another. Then 5 more in rapid succession. It started, Dashiell said when she answered his call. Dr. Walsh's interview just went live. The phones at every major news outlet in the city are ringing off the hook. Magnolia rolled out of bed and stumbled to her laptop. The headline on Channel 8's website made her catch her breath. Pediatrician breaks silence. I was framed by charity scammer. Below it was a video of Dr. Walsh, looking composed and determined as she laid out her story with devastating precision. She's incredible, Magnolia breathed, watching as Jennifer Walsh systematically dismantled 2 years of lies. Look at her. She's not the broken woman we met yesterday. Fighting back will do that to you, Dashiell said. Marcus goes live at 7, Catherine at 8. Are you ready for yours? Magnolia's interview was scheduled for 9 a.m. with Channel 12's investigative reporter Sarah Chen, ironically, the same station that had given Sebastian his sympathetic platform the day before. The poetic justice wasn't lost on anyone. As ready as someone can be to voluntarily destroy their entire life on television, she said, trying for humor but landing somewhere closer to hysteria. Hey. Dashiell's voice was gentle. You're not destroying your life. You're taking it back. 2 hours later, Magnolia sat in Channel 12's green room, watching Marcus Rodriguez command the screen with quiet authority. The former youth coach had traded his defeated expression for something fierce and uncompromising. Sebastian Grimm didn't just steal money, Marcus was saying, his voice steady and strong. He stole futures. Kids who should have been playing baseball and learning teamwork spent their seasons sitting on the sidelines because the equipment money disappeared into his offshore accounts. The interviewer leaned forward. "You're alleging a systematic pattern of fraud spanning several years?" "I'm not alleging it, I'm proving it." Marcus held up a thick folder. Bank records, email communications, forged documents, all provided by Dashiell Blackwood's private investigator. Sebastian Grimm has been running a charity scam that specifically targets people who work with children, because he knows we're the least likely to have resources to fight back. Magnolia felt a surge of pride watching Marcus reclaim his narrative. This wasn't a broken man begging for mercy. This was a coach rallying his team for the biggest game of their lives. "Ms. Thornfield?" A production assistant appeared at her elbow. "We're ready for you." The studio lights were blazingly hot, and the cameras looked like mechanical predators waiting to devour her. But when Sarah Chen smiled at her from across the interview table, Magnolia felt some of her nerves settle. "We're live in 30 seconds, Sarah said quietly. "Just tell your story. Let the truth speak for itself." The red light on the camera blinked on, and suddenly the entire city was watching. "Good morning. I'm Sarah Chen, and this is a Channel 12 News special report. With me now is Magnolia Thornfield, the kindergarten teacher who has become the center of a breaking scandal involving charity fraud and conspiracy." Sarah's professional smile was warm but serious. "Ms. Thornfield, 2 days ago, you were accused of embezzling from the Ashworth Foundation. Today, you're claiming you were framed. Tell us what really happened." Magnolia looked directly into the camera, thinking of her 20 students, of Elena hiding in her room, of all the people Sebastian had destroyed. "I had never heard of the Ashworth Foundation until Saturday night," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I received a call from Cordelia Whitmore Sterling, supposedly inviting me to be honored for my work with underprivileged children. But I've never worked with underprivileged children outside of my regular teaching job. I teach kindergarten at Roosevelt Elementary, that's it." Sarah nodded encouragingly. "So why do you think you were targeted?" "Because Sebastian Grimm needed a scapegoat. The Ashworth Foundation money was stolen. That part is true. But it was stolen by Sebastian, not by me. He needed someone to blame. Someone sympathetic enough that people would be outraged by the alleged crime, but powerless enough that they couldn't effectively fight back. That's a serious accusation. What evidence do you have?" Magnolia pulled out her own folder, copies of everything Patterson's investigator had uncovered. Bank records showing the money was moved to offshore accounts 3 days before I ever received that invitation. Email communications between Sebastian and his co-conspirators planning my setup. Most damaging of all, evidence that someone in the city attorney's office has been actively sabotaging investigations into Sebastian while fast-tracking prosecutions of his scapegoats. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. This was bigger than she'd expected. "You're alleging corruption within the district attorney's office?" "Assistant District Attorney Victoria Sterling has been receiving payments from Sebastian for 3 years. She's the one who made sure Dr. Jennifer Walsh's medical license was revoked without due process. She's the one who ensured Marcus Rodriguez's coaching certifications were permanently suspended. She's the one who would have made sure I was convicted and sent to prison while Sebastian disappeared with millions of dollars meant for sick children." The interview continued for another 15 minutes, with Magnolia methodically laying out the conspiracy with the calm precision of someone explaining a lesson plan to 5-year-olds. She was clear, factual, and devastating. When it was over, Sarah Chen walked her to the exit personally. "That was extraordinary," Sarah said quietly. "In 15 years of investigative journalism, I've rarely seen someone present a case that clearly under that kind of pressure. I've had practice explaining complicated things to people who don't want to listen," Magnolia said with a tired smile. "It's basically my job description." Outside the studio, Dashiell was waiting by his car, his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw her, his face broke into a grin that could have powered the city. "You were magnificent," he said, ending his call and pulling her into a hug that lifted her feet off the ground. Absolutely magnificent. For a moment, Magnolia let herself melt into his embrace, feeling safe and proud and possibly a little dizzy from the adrenaline crash. "Please tell me it worked," she said into his shoulder. "It more than worked. Patterson just called. The FBI wants to meet with all of us this afternoon. The city attorney's office just announced they're launching an internal investigation into Victoria Sterling. And Sebastian." Dashiell pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with satisfaction. "Sebastian's lawyer just called every major news outlet to say his client has no comment at this time." "No comment? That's not like him. Because he's scrambling. His whole strategy depended on controlling the narrative, making you look guilty before you could defend yourself. But you just blew up his playbook on live television." Magnolia's phone buzzed. Then again. Then continuously for the next several minutes. "More reporters?" she asked weakly. "Some. But also—" Dashiell grinned. "Check your messages." She scrolled through her phone, her eyes widening as she read. Messages from colleagues offering support. Former students' parents saying they never believed the accusations. Her principal, Mrs. Henderson, texting that the school board was calling an emergency meeting to discuss reinstating her. But the message that made her tear up was from a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Thornfield, this is Tommy Chen's mom. Tommy has been crying every day since he heard you were in trouble. He wants you to know that you're the best teacher ever and he's going to practice his reading extra hard until you come back. We believe in you." "Oh," she said softly, wiping at her eyes. "What is it?" She showed him the message. Dashiell read it, and his expression grew impossibly tender. "Those kids love you," he said quietly. "I love them too. More than I ever thought possible." She looked up at him. "Do you think this is really over? Do you think we actually won?" "The war isn't over yet," he said honestly. "Sebastian's going to fight back, and it's going to get ugly before it gets better. But yes, I think we won the most important battle. We proved your innocence. We exposed his pattern. We gave his other victims their voices back. And Elena? How is she handling all this?" Dashiell's smile was soft and proud. "She watched all the interviews this morning. Then she came out of her room for the first time in 3 months and made breakfast. She wants to know when she can meet the woman who totally destroyed that evil man on TV. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the complete upending of her quiet life, Magnolia found herself laughing. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like to meet the woman whose brother saved my life." "Magnolia?" Dashiell's voice was serious now, his hands framing her face gently. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have said yesterday." Her heart started beating faster. "What?" "I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and brave and terrifying. Around them, the city continued its relentless pace, but for Magnolia, everything had gone perfectly still. "Dashiell, I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other for 3 days. But watching you fight for those kids, for yourself, for people you'd never even met, you're extraordinary, Magnolia Thornfield, and I'm completely, hopelessly in love with you." Before she could respond, her phone rang again. This time it was Patterson. "I hate to interrupt," Dashiell said, glancing at the caller ID, "but this is probably important." She answered the call on speaker. "Mr. Patterson? Magnolia, you need to get somewhere safe immediately. Sebastian just posted bail, and according to our sources, he's not planning to go quietly. The romance would have to wait. The war was about to begin in earnest. We need to go, now." Dashiell's voice was sharp with urgency as he guided Magnolia toward his car. "Where?" she asked, her mind still reeling from both his love confession and Patterson's warning. "Somewhere Sebastian can't find us. Somewhere we can—" The screech of tires interrupted him. A black SUV rounded the corner at dangerous speed, heading straight for them. Dashiell grabbed Magnolia's hand and pulled her behind a parked delivery truck just as the SUV mounted the sidewalk where they'd been standing. "Run," he said grimly, pulling out his phone. "Police station." 3 blocks north. They ran through the city streets like characters in an action movie, dodging pedestrians and jumping over fire hydrants. Behind them, car doors slammed and heavy footsteps gave chase. Magnolia's interview outfit, a sensible blazer and low heels, had never been designed for fleeing from potential kidnappers. "This is insane," she panted as they ducked into an alley. "People don't actually do this in real life." "Sebastian's not people," Dashiell replied grimly, peering around the corner. "He's a cornered animal with nothing left to lose." They made it to the police station just as Patterson's call connected to Dashiell's phone. Through the speaker, they could hear sirens in the background. "Thank God you're safe," Patterson's voice crackled through. "Sebastian's completely unraveled. He tried to storm Channel 12's offices 20 minutes ago, demanding they retract your interview." "Tried to storm?" Magnolia asked, still catching her breath. "Security stopped him, but not before he threatened to destroy everyone involved in this conspiracy against him." Patterson paused. "The FBI wants to see all of you immediately, and they're providing protective custody until Sebastian's back in custody." 2 hours later, they sat in a federal conference room that smelled like coffee and justice. FBI agent Maria Santos spread photos across the table with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "Sebastian Grimm is officially a flight risk," Agent Santos announced. "We found evidence he was planning to disappear to a non-extradition country as soon as the heat died down. Your interviews this morning accelerated his timeline." "Is that good or bad?" Magnolia asked. "Good for justice, bad for your immediate safety. Desperate people do desperate things." Agent Santos pointed to surveillance photos of Sebastian at various locations around the city. "He's been to your apartment building, your school, and Mr. Blackwood's office. He's looking for leverage." Dashiell leaned forward. "What kind of leverage?" "The kind that involves threatening people you care about until you agree to publicly recant your allegations." Magnolia felt cold dread settle in her stomach. "My students, he wouldn't actually, he's already tried. Showed up at Roosevelt Elementary an hour ago claiming to be conducting a charity audit. Principal Henderson called security immediately." Agent Santos's expression was grim. "The man is completely unhinged." "How long until you catch him?" Dashiell asked. "Could be hours, could be days. He's got money, connections, and 3 years' experience staying ahead of investigations." Agent Santos closed the folder. "In the meantime, you're both staying in protective custody." Which was how Magnolia found herself in a FBI safe house that looked like someone's suburban grandmother's living room, complete with doilies and a cat clock with moving eyes. She sat on the floral sofa, still wearing her interview clothes, trying to process how her life had become a federal case. "Penny for your thoughts?" Dashiell said, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee from the world's most cheerful kitchen. "I'm thinking that this morning I was on television accusing powerful people of conspiracy. This afternoon someone tried to run us over with an SUV, and tonight I'm in witness protection." She accepted the coffee gratefully. "Also, I think you said something important earlier that we never got to finish discussing." Dashiell's cheeks flushed slightly. "The part where I declared my love for you in the middle of a federal investigation?" "That would be the part, yes." "Terrible timing?" "Actually," Magnolia said, turning to face him fully, "I think it might have been perfect timing." "How do you figure?" "Because if someone's going to threaten my life and put me in witness protection, I'd rather know that the person I'm hiding with is someone who—" She paused, suddenly shy. "Someone who loves me." Dashiell set down his coffee cup and reached for her hands. "And how do you feel about that someone?" "Well," she said, her heart racing, "I'm thinking that falling in love with a man who hires private investigators and has raccoons named after nobility and saves kindergarten teachers from charity scammers is probably the most sensible thing I've ever done." "Is that a yes?" "That's a, I'm completely hopelessly in love with you too, Dashiell Blackwood." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and perfect, and for a moment the safe house disappeared around them. There was just this. The two of them, finally honest about what had been building between them since that first moment at the gala. When they broke apart, Dashiell rested his forehead against hers. "I have a confession to make." "Another one?" I've been planning our first real date since the moment you threw water in Sebastian's face. Magnolia laughed. Oh, really? And what did you have in mind? Dinner somewhere that doesn't require bulletproof glass. Maybe a movie that isn't about federal crimes. Possibly meeting my raccoon family without the threat of imminent danger. That sounds perfect. Very romantic. I was also thinking, he said quietly, that afterwards, if you wanted, I could introduce you to Elena properly. She's been asking about you nonstop. Magnolia felt her heart melt completely. I'd love that. They spent the evening planning their future. Tentative, hopeful conversations about what would happen when Sebastian was caught, when the legal proceedings were over, when their lives returned to something resembling normal. Dashiell told her about his work, his family, his secret dream of maybe teaching business classes someday. Magnolia talked about her students, her tiny apartment, her plans to maybe write children's books about brave little kids who solve big problems. You know what's funny? She said as they shared a bag of stale pretzels from the safe house kitchen. What? 3 days ago I thought my life was boring. Same routine every day, same little apartment, same quiet existence. I actually envied people who had excitement and adventure. And now? Now I'm thinking that quiet and boring might have been underrated. She smiled at him. But I wouldn't change any of it. Not the gala, not the conspiracy, not even almost getting run over by an SUV. Why not? Because it led me to you. Dashiell's answering smile was brilliant enough to light up the entire safe house. Even if our love story started with charity fraud and witness protection? Especially because of that. How many couples can say their first date was planning the downfall of a criminal mastermind? Not many, I'd guess. Agent Santos appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Magnolia's heart stopped, fearing the worst news. We got him, she said simply. The relief was so intense that Magnolia actually felt dizzy. Really? Sebastian tried to board a private plane to the Cayman Islands an hour ago. FBI agents were waiting for him at the airport. Agent Santos smiled for the first time since they'd met her. It's over, you can go home. Home. Magnolia thought about her tiny apartment, her Murphy bed, her job that might or might not still be waiting for her. Then she looked at Dashiell, who was watching her with an expression of pure adoration, and realized that home might be more flexible a concept than she'd previously understood. There's one more thing, Agent Santos continued. The city attorney's office wants to meet with you both tomorrow. Apparently, Victoria Sterling has decided to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's providing evidence against Sebastian's entire network. His entire network? Dashiell asked. 12 people, including 3 other government officials and several charity board members. This conspiracy goes back almost a decade. Agent Santos shook her head. You two just brought down one of the largest charity fraud rings in the state's history. As Agent Santos left them alone again, Magnolia turned to Dashiell with wonder in her eyes. We did it, she said quietly. We did it, he agreed. So what happens now? Dashiell stood up and extended his hand to her, just as he had in her apartment that morning, though it felt like a lifetime ago. Now, he said, we go home. We start over. We see where this crazy, beautiful, completely unexpected love story takes us. Magnolia took his hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit with hers. I have one request, she said as they prepared to leave the safe house. Anything. Our first official date? I want to meet the raccoons first. Dashiell's laughter filled the room, warm and joyous and full of promise for all the adventures still to come. 1 year later, the Roosevelt Elementary playground echoed with the delighted squeals of 23 kindergartners chasing bubbles in the afternoon sun. Magnolia sat on the familiar bench watching Tommy Chen help Sarah Martinez tie her shoelaces, and felt that warm contentment that came from being exactly where she belonged. Miss Thornfield, called Lucy Wang, racing over with a dandelion clutched in her tiny fist. Look what I found. It's for you. It's beautiful, Lucy. Thank you. Magnolia tucked the weed behind her ear like a precious flower, earning a giggle from her student. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dashiell. Coffee date with Duchess went well. She only stole 2 sugar packets this time. Pick you up at 4? She typed back. Can't wait. Elena still coming to dinner Sunday? Wouldn't miss it. She's making her famous chocolate chip cookies. Fair warning, she's been practicing her embarrassing brother stories all week. Magnolia laughed, drawing curious looks from her students. Elena had become like the sister she'd never had, and their Sunday dinners at Dashiell's penthouse had become a cherished tradition. The raccoon family had expanded too. Duchess was now a grandmother, with 3 new babies that Elena had named Shakespeare, Austen, and Dickens. Miss Thornfield, called Marcus Chen, Tommy's father, from across the playground. Could I speak with you for a moment? She walked over, noting his nervous expression. Is everything okay with Tommy? More than okay. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Marcus smiled. My wife and I have been discussing it, and we'd like to make a donation to your classroom. For supplies, books, whatever you need. Mr. Chen, that's incredibly generous, but please. After everything you went through, the way you fought for what was right, you're a hero to our kids, to all of us. His eyes were sincere. Tommy talks about you constantly, says you're the bravest person he knows. Magnolia felt tears prick her eyes. That's very kind, but I just did what anyone would do. No, Marcus said firmly. You did what heroes do. You stood up to powerful people who were hurting children. You risked everything for justice. After he left, Magnolia sat quietly on her bench thinking about how much had changed. Sebastian was serving 15 years in federal prison. Victoria Sterling had received 5 years and was disbarred. The charity fraud ring had been completely dismantled, with millions of dollars recovered and returned to legitimate children's organizations. Dr. Walsh had gotten her medical license restored and was back to saving lives. Marcus Rodriguez was coaching again, with a championship trophy on his office wall. Catherine Ming had started a new scholarship fund, this time with ironclad protections against fraud. And Magnolia, she was exactly where she'd always been, teaching kindergarten, loving her students, living in her tiny apartment. But everything felt different now. Richer, more meaningful. There's my favorite teacher, a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to find Dashiell approaching, looking devastatingly handsome in his business suit, carrying 2 coffee cups and wearing the smile that still made her heart skip. You're early, she said, standing to greet him. I missed you. He handed her a coffee and pulled her into his arms for a kiss that tasted like promises and forever. Good day? The best. Marcus Chen wants to make a donation to my classroom. Lucy Wang gave me a dandelion. And Tommy Chen tied his shoes without help for the first time. Sounds like a perfect day. It was. How was your board meeting? Dashiell's grin widened. Excellent, actually. The Blackwood Foundation's education initiative was approved unanimously. We'll be able to fund art and music programs in 12 under-resourced schools starting next semester. They walked toward his car, fingers intertwined, talking about their days like the established couple they'd become. In the distance, Magnolia could see her students being picked up by parents, their backpacks bouncing as they ran to waiting arms. Dashiell? She said as they reached the car. Yeah? Do you ever think about how we met? How completely insane our whole story is? He opened her car door, his expression tender. Every day. Why? I was just thinking that if someone wrote our story as a novel, people would say it was too unbelievable. Charity scammer, federal conspiracy, raccoon families, falling in love and witness protection. Don't forget the water throwing. That's probably the most unbelievable part. Magnolia laughed. I still can't believe I did that. I can. Dashiell cupped her face gently. I fell in love with you the moment you threw that water, Magnolia Thornfield. You were magnificent then, and you're magnificent now. Even covered in finger paint and dandelion seeds. Especially then. As they drove through the city toward home, and these days home was wherever they were together, Magnolia reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them here. A phone call that changed everything. A gala that nearly destroyed her. A conspiracy that revealed the love of her life. Any regrets? Dashiell asked, as if reading her thoughts. Magnolia looked at him, this brilliant, kind, raccoon-loving man who'd risked everything to save her, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude for every impossible moment that had led them here. "Not a single one," she said, and meant it completely. Outside the car windows, the city sparkled with possibility, and somewhere in a penthouse 40 floors up, a family of raccoons waited for their evening treats, completely unaware that they'd played a small but crucial role in the greatest love story never meant to happen.